Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here, and cinema's most famous swashbuckling feline is pouncing back into theaters. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish just hit theaters. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So the character Puss in Boots has had almost a surprisingly long nap, it seems. It's been 11 years since the original Puss in Boots movie, and somehow, in some crazy way, it's been 12 years since the last Shrek movie. I don't know why it's taking so long to kind of bring that property back to into movies and into cinema. But kind of despite the absence, the characters still remain popular. They're still kind of out there in various different forms, and the Shrek, I don't know if you call it like the Shrek cinematic universe, has always had, it's just been like a fun sandbox to play around with, kind of melding the classical fairy tales with more like contemporary jokes and almost like meta humor, which has just always made those movies just think captivating and kind of enjoyable about that. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is able to capture some of that same kind of charm in its paws, but unfortunately it also kind of bares its teeth with kind of a sharper, almost cynical tone that, at least as a parent, I took a bit of issue with. But hey, we will get into that. But to kick off, if you're not familiar with this movie, it has a fairly amusing premise. Kind of the legend of Puss in Boots has grown over the years. He's a famous sort of outlaw, and kind of his own ego has grown right alongside the legend. But when a fight with the giant kind of goes not according to plan, and Puss in Boots dies for the 8th time, kind of he's left on his 9th, his last life, and kind of loses his confidence. He has his safety net is gone, and kind of, as it seems, his only hope for kind of returning back to being the persona, the legend of Puss in Boots, is to kind of track down this mythical, legendary wishing star and kind of get his lives back. But he's not the only kind of classical fairy tale character that's sort of on the prowl for this. You have Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and you have Jack Horner. And the film does, a lot like the Shrek movies, although never quite as clever, kind of plays around with some of those, the familiar things, you know, there's a lot of cameos and stuff from different fairy tales. But as far as the movie, there's a scene kind of early in this movie where Puss in Boots is fighting a giant, and he kind of gets thrown into some coffee shop place, and kind of pauses mid-combat to take a sip of coffee, and his eyes bug, and he, like, charges back in this, like, hyper caffeine-fueled attack frenzy. And that scene kind of is foreshadowing for the whole the pacing for this movie. There are some moments kind of scattered throughout where the film slows down and kind of deals with almost surprisingly, perhaps even too mature of themes, and like mortality and abandonment, and it does have kind of some character moments. But those, there's, never have to wait too long. There's always sort of a hyper-fueled action scene not too far away. And when those scenes and those moments happen, it almost kind of brought to mind something like the Lego movie, where it's just stimuli overload and things are happening fast and furious. I think maybe personal tastes and perhaps the age of the audience will kind of determine whether that's amusing and captivating, or whether it just sort of becomes exhausting. I kind of fell somewhat into the latter camp of that. There's just a lot going on. The tone is sort of another conversation about this movie that I think, at least to me, kind of overshadows a lot of the other stuff going on, like some of the more positive things. But there is positive stuff in this movie. There's stuff to enjoy. But the tone, and like the Shrek movies, if you've seen kind of the original 4 Shrek movies, and even the first Puss in Boots, they've always kind of had like an amusing, like irrelevant, kind of edgy humor that pushes the boundaries a bit for like stuff in a kids movie. So that is part of like the DNA of these stories. But The Last Wish, at least to me, kind of sometimes pushes a little bit too far with its kind of sharp and just sort of cynical tone. And probably the area where that's the most noticeable is definitely in the dialogue, and we'll get into in the content to consider a little bit more of the details about that. But kind of whereas like the Shrek movies had a lot of often a clever dialogue, The Last Wish too often just sort of falls back on just insults. A character will just look at another character and say, "Hey, you idiot," and that's it. That's the joke. It's supposed to be funny because he said something mean. And again, in isolation, or even if it was like just the villain and he just said mean things and that was his character, you can kind of stomach it a little bit more. But kind of all throughout, characters just talk horrendously to each other. every character, almost every conversation, even like Puss in Boots and like the good guys and Goldilocks and the three bears, and then like Jack Horner, who's more like the villain, the clear villain in this story. Is that almost every conversation is just filled with like rude insults and bards and just words that you don't necessarily kind of want your kids to repeat, and it's sort of that tone kind of suffocates a lot of like the warmth and like the more like positive and like feel good moments in this, and just sort of colors the entire movie from start to finish in a very kind of mean spirited, cynical tone. So as far as content to consider, kind of things going on the surface of this movie, there's actually quite a bit. So let's get into this. So violence. Uh, at the beginning, Puss is shown, his 8 previous deaths are shown. So you see him die multiple times, although it's played, I think, effectively just for humor. It's not like disturbing or anything. It is funny, but there's also just plenty of talk. Like, characters talk about like murdering and killing, and some of the henchmen kind of keep wanting to talk about how there's a lot of murdering involved to get this object, or there's a lot of talk about that, and you do see some of that murdering and killing. Kind of the Jack Horner, the main kind of villain in this, has like his baker's dozen, they call him, which is kind of 13 henchmen. None of them make it. You kind of see them die in various ways. Most of them are fairly amusing. They get hit by like a unicorn horn and burst into like confetti. A bunch of them just straight up fall down a chasm and die in the fall. Apparently you don't see them land, but you don't see them again. Probably the most gruesome, there's like a kind of a deadly plant obstacle that they're trying to get through, and it eats a guy, leaving just a skeleton. It's kind of an almost, it's like bloody or anything, but it is pretty violent and kind of implied. So there's that, and you see like in the sword fight, like, Puss in Boots gets cut and there's a bit of blood on his like forehead. So there is violence. And the sexuality, the only thing that came to mind potentially as far as sexuality is Puss in Boots is sort of, he has a moment where he's sort of in like a cat house and he's sort of retired for a bit. And he's in like a litter box, and it's sort of being shown that he's not used to like acting like a cat and not using like toilets and stuff. So he's there, and there's one scene where he's using the litter box, and he looks over, and there's like another cat waiting in line to go next, and he's just like staring at him uncomfortably, and his like eyes kind of dart down. And at least to me, I don't think that was played in like a sexual way, or maybe that's not what they were going for, but it could be interpreted that way. And as far as like profanity, here's probably the most in this movie, at least to me, as far as like watching this as a parent, the most concerning elements. And because there's a lot of language and words and stuff in this. The biggest one, and I'm not 100% sure I caught it accurate. I think I did, but there's one moment where Puss in Boots straight up swears, where kind of the dog friend is asking him to like rub his belly, and Puss kind of looks at him and says, what the hell are you doing? Which, if I did hear that right, and I think I did, completely inappropriate kind of phrasing to use in an animated children's movie. And there's also there's several scenes where there's like implied swears that they censor out in various ways. One character, when they're in that flower scene in the movie, says, all I smell is bull, and she goes to finish it, and another character kind of goes shh, and it obviously completes the word. So there's that, and there's a kind of a repeated gag, which this seems like it's becoming more and more popular. They did this in the Super Pets movies as well, where the dog like swears, but they bleep it out. And so that happens once earlier, but then they like double down on that, and later the dog's kind of involved in like an insult game, and goes on for like a good minute of sort of this tirade, and there's this constant bleeps and kind of implied swears. So there's definitely that. I just don't find that a funny gag, especially in a kids movie, but they do that. And then there's also just kind of plenty of just sort of what I call like rude words, like heck and idiot and crap and stupid. Just sort of all throughout, this characters are saying words like that. And the last one, and I'm not entirely sure what all, if this is much to do about nothing, but there is a moment where a character kind of goes off on a rant in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I don't know what he was saying, but as he did that, multiple people in our movie theater reacted out loud and strongly towards what was being said. So I don't know if you're like me, maybe or kids don't know Spanish, won't pick up on that. But there may be something in there that I just didn't catch. Maybe the other one kind of other kind of content stuff. Two different things. One, milk is sort of used throughout this as like a stand-in for alcohol, both sort of visually, like, they're kind of at the bar ordering a milk. He's a cat, but they also they get drunk on milk, and they kind of play around with some of that. And there's just a couple scenes where characters are like showing like kind of almost like in a casino or gambling or playing cards, and they don't emphasize it necessarily a whole lot, but that's definitely in there as well. As far as themes, kind of things going on beneath the surface of this, probably the main theme is just sort of like a message to not kind of wish away the life that you have, but instead just to enjoy the blessings and kind of realize all the good things you have. Obviously, a wish just sort of by definition, sort of is like a forward-thinking, wanting a different future, wanting things to be different. And kind of one of the ironies in this film is like all the characters that are on this journey to find this wish that will apparently make their life so much better, they all kind of already have the things that they want to wish for, and kind of as the audience, as the story progresses, you come to realize that they're trying to wish for things that they have, whether that's just like companionship, or Goldilocks feels abandoned, wishes she had a family, although the bears sort of have become her family, or Jack Horner's from the nursery rhyme, kind of he wants more of what he already has. Seems like he has a good life, so it does have a pretty kind of a wholesome, positive message in there. A couple of scripture verses that come to mind, kind of James 4:14, where it kind of says, what is life? You're sort of a mist, a vapor that vanishes. And then Jesus in Matthew 6, where it says, don't be anxious for tomorrow. Tomorrow has its own worries, so they'll take care of themselves. So I do think it does reflect some biblical themes as far as this kind of appreciating the blessings around you, and not just kind of becoming blind to that because you're looking for something that you hope for that will be different. Kind of the grass is green on the other side. Maybe another theme, as far as like I saw this movie with my two 7-year-olds, and I kind of asked them after the movie, what was the point of this movie? And their response was that it's okay to be afraid. And I think that is definitely a theme that's throughout here. Kind of the Puss in Boots persona is very much built on the fact that he is fearless. This is sort of like his theme song that he constantly sings throughout this movie is, who is your favorite fearless hero? That's sort of kind of what he's known for. He's not scared of anything, although most of what he does in this movie is driven by fear, or trying to conceal the fact that he's afraid, or especially when he kind of gets down to his last life and he loses his confidence, doesn't have a safety net. Again, I think that's also a biblical theme. The Bible's clear that, hey, fear is a natural response to scary situations, but as Christians, you obviously walking with, we don't walk those journeys alone. We have nothing to be afraid of. So I do think there's some, thematically, there's some wholesome and positive messages in this. So in the end, I think Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, it's fine. I didn't necessarily hate this movie. Maybe I didn't dislike it as much as this review seems like I did. There is positives in this. There's some funny characters, like a Jiminy Cricket kind of character, which is one of the funniest characters that I've seen in a movie in a long time. Definitely some good humor, and even like the villain, there's like a wolf bounty hunter, which is like a legitimately intimidating, frightening character, and I think maybe to the point that some younger audiences it might be too intense for them. So there is some good ideas. There is some fun with like the fairy tale world and some of the humor that comes with that. And this Puss in Boots himself is just an amusing character that you can do a lot of fun stuff with, and the animation is fine in this thing too, although it's not spectacular by any means. But I kind of come at this wearing two hats. As a movie reviewer, hey, there's some good stuff. There's some good storytelling stuff. But as a father, just some of the content stuff, some of the tone, this sort of left me with a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. I just wasn't impressed with the way that characters talk, and just sort of how all the characters seem to like dislike each other, and this the emphasis on like kind of more juvenile insults and language. So I don't know. I think especially if you're a parent, you got to be aware of that going into this movie. That is definitely an element of it. But hey, let me know if you guys do see this movie, or if you just have more questions about some of the content or some of the stuff going on in this movie. We'd love to have a conversation with you in the comment section and answer your questions and just hear what you guys thought of this movie or what your kids thought of this movie. And I want to encourage you, if you haven't done so, subscribe to our channel, become a Collider. I got a lot of movie reviews and live streams and other stuff. We'd just love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thanks for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide through World for Christ.